Well, all new tonight, a focus on missing people and murder cases that very often don't get a lot of attention. Now, 3 women in Western North Carolina are making it their mission to highlight those cases in a podcast, all surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous women. Queen City News reporter Derek Dellinger tonight brings us inside the booth and the effort to get the word out.
You're going to see this abbreviation a few times in our story tonight, MMIW. It stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. There are cases that often go underreported or sometimes unreported, but those in the Indigenous community describe it as an epidemic. There are names like Alyssa McLemore, Tristan Gray, Danielle Brady, Sky Jim, Brittany Tiger, Jocelyn Watt, Jade Wagon, Ashley Aldrich, Misty Upham. They are all names you may not know, but they are the names of some Native American women across the nation whose disappearances or deaths have met with suspicion. Now, 3 women here in North Carolina have made it their mission to get the names of the missing and murdered and their cases out. On a Sunday afternoon in the mountains of Western North Carolina, a sewing room becomes something else. It's a discussion space for 3 women who, over the last several months, have had a lot of conversations, sometimes dark.
Selena's family has experienced an extreme amount of loss.
Sometimes light.
A year, right?
But always serious and recorded for a podcast they call We Are Resilient, true crime podcast focusing on missing and murdered Indigenous women. The focus today is on a woman named Pepita Redhair, a member of the Navajo Nation in New Mexico, who has been missing for nearly 2 years. The family desperate for answers.
I feel like they haven't had a lot of support from the police or from the local government. And so when we see cases like this, we want to do everything we can to highlight them, even though they're not necessarily within our region, our area. You know, we feel like there's a responsibility to tell these stories.
Shiashi Little Dave is one of the 3 hosts. She, Maggie Jackson, and Asha Stevens are all members of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, a tribe with its own cases. After an event on the Cherokee Indian Reservation highlighting those cases last year, they felt more needed to be done.
It's epidemic level problems. And I was like, you know, somebody really should do something about this.
We literally sat in this room one day and she actually had her first case, and we kind of just winged it from there.
They are 10 episodes in, with several other mini episodes focusing on other cases.
I don't think anybody realized what a significant issue it was and how many cases we have here, because even we didn't know there was that many.
Nationwide, there are stories, faces, and names. Savannah LaFontaine Graywind, Selena Not Afraid, Courtney Holden, Ella Mae Begay, Rose Downwind. Names you may not know, but cases where Native American women were brutally murdered, vanished without a trace, or found dead under mysterious circumstances. The National Congress for American Indians says Indigenous women are 10 times more likely to be murdered in some parts of the country, and more often than not, it's at the hands of someone who is not Native American.
50% of Native American women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. And that's the kind of the common thread that we hear here in a lot of our cases, is that domestic violence plays a big part in what happens to these women.
One of the cases they've covered involves someone who is close to one of the hosts. Brittany Little Dave went missing in California in September of last year. She's a member of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. Brittany is Shiashi's cousin.
I can see her sister, my cousin Summer, doing all the searching and the posting and calling news stations. And she's putting out reports and calling investigators. Is that how truly difficult it is to keep your loved one at the forefront of this?
There's not been much coverage of Brittany Little Dave's disappearance. She went missing just a week before another high-profile case took shape that grabbed the headlines.
If we talk about Gabby Petito and the fact that in the state she went missing, there are 710 missing Indigenous people there that have received like little to no coverage to the extent she did. It's just, all I can say is just, it's unfair.
It did not feel good.
Jolene Holgate is with the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. She spoke with our sister station in New Mexico late last year on the lack of attention on these cases, which along with other missing person cases in minority communities often don't get as much news coverage. But Holgate says it's more than just the lack of media attention. It's also the attention from authorities.
If we saw that same energy with all of these resources available for one case, I can't even imagine how many of our Indigenous women and girls they would find.
The lack of resources, the lack of the investigations, the jurisdiction restrictions, those all come into play.
There are efforts to address this federally. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, the first Indigenous person to serve as a White House cabinet secretary, announced a missing and murdered unit within the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Social media is also a valuable tool in getting the word out, and the We Are Resilient podcast is an extension of that. Little Dave, Jackson, and Stevens all say the response they've gotten so far to the real conversation they've had on these cases is not going unnoticed. Families are reaching out, and the podcast now has thousands of downloads.
It's just reassuring to us that we're doing what we're supposed to do here.
Letting not just the Native American community know, but having everyone know who these women are.
It's better to say their name and share their story than to left it unsaid.
One, they should matter anyways, because all these women are people. And they're people that matter.
And hoping that the attention will result in some resolution for friends and family who want to know answers. In all of our checking, none of the cases involving the missing and murdered women gained any great deal of regional or national attention, and only a handful of these cases have been covered to any great degree, even in the areas where they happened. The hosts of We Are Resilient say there are more cases that they do plan on covering to get the names, the faces, and their cases out.
Derek Dillinger, thank you so much for shining a spotlight on such an important story. For more on this and efforts to solve these cold cases, just head to our website for the full story at qcnews.com.